Welcome back. Bill Gertz, our duty expert on what's going on inside the ring, joins us. He is, of course, the author of a prize-winning column by that name at the Washington Times, also the senior editor at the Washington Free Beacon, one of the most prolific and influential national security reporters, certainly of our time, perhaps of any time. Always welcome here. Bill, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Frank. Good to be on the program.
You were out at STRATCOM, the Strategic Command, for a sort of overview of what they're up to these days this week, in the course of which you heard the commander, Admiral Cecil Haney, endorsing this ObamaBomb deal. What did you make of that?
It was very surprising. I felt that Admiral Cecil Haney, who is the U.S. Strategic Command commander, is pretty straightforward and frank, although I really felt that he gave the Iran deal a fairly tepid endorsement. I asked him, do you support it? And it was an obvious question for somebody of four-star rank, but he basically said that he felt that the administration was pushing this notion of a world without nuclear weapons, although he did seem fairly skeptical about that notion and said he doesn't think that that's going to happen anytime soon. It was instructive that he would say that he felt that the Iran deal was a good international effort at trying to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear bomb, and he said basically if this would help Iran not get a nuclear bomb, then he would be in favor of it, although I didn't feel like he really believed that.
I have the feeling there's a lot of that going on. In fact, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Martin Dempsey, this week in congressional testimony, gave a similarly kind of tepid endorsement. He described it as being pragmatic and that it might help avoid a near-term war with Iran. Hardly a ringing endorsement. And Bill, I mean, nobody tracks the Pentagon and its thinking better than you. What is going on inside the building? They don't seem to have been terribly involved in this negotiation. Is there really much enthusiasm for what's come up?
No, I don't think there is. First of all, I think to understand what's going on in the Pentagon, morale is the lowest I've ever seen it in my many 30 years of covering the Pentagon. And part of the problem is that the distraction they have is trying to fund their basic elements of all the military services programs. And I think that was somewhat calculated by the Obama administration to keep the military off guard. I mean, we're looking at $1 trillion in cuts over the last 6 years and the coming 4 years, and they're taking huge hits, and they can't even focus on enough funds to do their own mission. So I think that's really the problem. You can't get the military to focus. Now, they say that they're ready to deal with any military contingency related to Iran and its nuclear program. But then again, like I say, they're so distracted by the budget crisis.
Well, and as I understand it, we've now got us importuning the French to send an aircraft carrier battle group into the Persian Gulf because we don't have one available at the moment, which is a pretty sorry state of affairs. Bill, one other thing that you've reported on from, I guess, your conversations with STRATCOM was the heightened interest that they now have in the so-called hypersonic missile threat. Give us an update on that.
Yes, I had an interview with a couple other reporters and myself with Admiral Haney, and I asked him about the hypersonic missile threat. I said China has conducted 4 hypersonic tests in the past couple of years. The Russians conducted one in February. This is a new emerging threatening technology, and he rightly jumped on it and said, yeah, this is something that we're worried about. Also, General Kowalski, the deputy commander of STRATCOM, who also met with reporters there, also voiced his concerns as well about this threat. He says once you get a maneuvering high-speed missile, it makes it very, very difficult for our defenses and our sensors. So that's the key to understanding nuclear threats, is being able to sense them and counter them. And so obviously they're focusing on it quite a bit.
So in other words, Bill, as you've reported, this is something that they envision being used by one or both of these adversaries and presumably over time by others to defeat our missile defenses and use to attack us with nuclear weapons? Is that the concern?
Yes, these are clearly nuclear strike vehicles. In the case of China, there's concern that they will also use their hypersonic glide vehicle, that is a Mach 10 high-speed plane that flies on the edge of space, for conventional strikes, kind of as a follow-on to their unique anti-ship ballistic missile, the DF-21D.
This is unfortunately not the only threat that we're facing from, among others, the Chinese, Bill, and you've reported this week that the Office of Personnel Management cyber hack may not only be the shape of things to come in terms of big data raids, but also we might see a lot more of them because of the fecklessness of the response to date. That's something you're getting from military sources as well?
Yeah, there was a major intelligence assessment of cyber attacks against the United States, and the conclusion, I don't have the details, but the conclusion was that as long as the Obama administration continues its weak response to these massive data thefts, that these attacks are going to continue. I guess that's kind of a no-brainer for most people, but it seemed to me that the intelligence community was doing a subtle dig at the policymakers, telling them that unless a greater response is taken, we're going to be attacked further, and the attacks could be more devastating.
Yeah, these are pretty worrisome as they are, let alone if they become worse. Bill, another threat that you have been covering is out of North Korea. You've described a series of purges that are taking place that suggest, I guess, continuing instability within the regime of Kim Jong-un there, but also that you anticipate from your sources a provocation sometime in the fall that may demonstrate a new and ominous military capability against this country. Talk about that.
The Kim Jong-un regime, he's 32 years old, very inexperienced, and he's trying to consolidate his hold on power. So he's purged as many as 70 officials who've been either executed or sent to prison labor camps. The provocation is going to be a long-range missile test, which is likely to take place on October 10th, which is the 70th anniversary of the founding of the communist regime in North Korea. So all intelligence sensors are focused on a number of areas, and a couple of think tanks have identified some recent activity at some of these missile sites, which would lend credibility to these reports that there's going to be a major provocation coming in the coming months.
That could constitute not just a provocation, but actually a very serious threat to this country, I take it, as well.
Well, absolutely. North Korea has publicly stated that one of their objectives is to be able to attack the United States with nuclear weapons, which is kind of alarming. It's just one reason that we have a rudimentary missile defense system right now.
Yeah, not nearly enough, and we ought to be about improving it, especially in light of this hypersonic threat you've described, Bill Gertz. Another threat vector you've been covering at the Washington Free Beacon was the apparent shoot-down of a U.S. Border Patrol helicopter by the Los Zetas drug cartel, a particularly dangerous part of the international organized crime syndicate. We'll be talking about more with Roger Noriega momentarily. What's the story with that, and what do you think its implications might be for, among other things, our border security?
The Los Zetas drug cartel, which is in Mexico, recently had a shootout with a Border Patrol helicopter, a EC-120 helicopter. It was doing a routine surveillance along the border, and a group of Zetas drug runners were returning from the United States, making a shipment of drugs in the United States, and then returning, fired automatic weapons, and forced the helicopter to make an emergency landing. It certainly highlights the porous border security that we have, and it shows that the Zetas appear to be operating with impunity on the southern border. This happened in the border town of Laredo, Texas.
Deeply worrying, and evidence of a dangerous world that you cover better than just about anybody. Bill Gertz, thanks for joining us each week. It's always a pleasure, if daunting, to hear what's going on, but nonetheless to take the unvarnished truth from you. I appreciate your time. Next up, we'll be speaking with Fred Fleitz. Straight ahead.